Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short with another analysis video on a cultural topic from a biblical perspective. And so I see this ministry as sort of a discipleship ministry where it says in Matthew 28, it says, go out into the world and make disciples of all the nations, and teaching them all that I've commanded, all that Christ commanded, and baptizing them and winning them and developing them into solid Christians. So what we do here is when we look at news articles that have something to do with our Christian faith, some moral value, some spiritual value, then we address those issues and help people apply the Bible to everyday living. And we are living in an insane time, a chaotic time, a foolish time. We're witnessing, we have a front row seat to the cultural decline of the Western civilization, and especially the United States. As we watch every day our culture slide into the abyss of destruction. And I was at a prayer meeting the other day, and I said to someone there, it's almost as if these people live on a different planet. And it's almost as if they are in a different universe. I have almost nothing in common with the growing secular culture that we live in. And one of the big important points of this secular culture is that we have to accommodate everyone's little whim and will about anything. And right now, the big push is to get people who identify with the opposite sex, identify as the opposite sex, they have to be given total 100% affirmation. They have to be given special concessions. They have to be treated like royalty because they claim to be members of the opposite sex, even though it's clearly evident that they are not members of the opposite sex. They are the same sex they've always been. And I'm talking mainly about boys, or now men also, who are trying to compete in women's sports by claiming that they are women. They are trans women, they claim, and that they identify as women, so they should be able to compete against real women, real biological women, in any kind of sport they want. And you would think this would be so clear-cut that people would go, no, if you're a man, if you're a boy, if your biology is male, no, you cannot compete with females in their sport because you are not female. You would think it would be so clear as day. This is one of those no-brainer moments where you would guess, if you were an observer on, say, a time machine and 30 years ago, and this question, well, can a boy claim to be a girl and then go on and compete in girls' sports? You would have to say, no way. There's not, and the courts would never allow that. Well, we have arrived today, and we've been here for about 2 or 3 years, where courts, judges, supposed rational people, and government officials, the Biden administration, the Democrat liberal leftists in Washington in power in the states and local areas, they are now claiming that if you're a boy, you can actually run on the girls' track team if you claim to be a girl. And the law will just treat you favorably and defend your right to run on the girls' track team. And that's what we have today. And that's what we're going to talk about, this insanity. Even though the Bible says in the book of Genesis, God made them male, and then another category called female, and he established that right from the very beginning of the human race. And then in the New Testament, Jesus, thousands of years later, reaffirms that same basic binary category, male and female. And you would think that coming from a traditional Christian heritage in the West, and with so many churches here in the United States and so many people claiming to be Christian, that you would think, well, this is clearly something that people would reject. Well, they're not. In fact, if you take polls in this country, we're seeing more and more and more and more acceptance of this foolishness. And as Christians, we have to say, look, we're going to stand for God's truth. We're going to speak the truth. We're not going to be bullied into believing lies, speaking lies, acting like lies are true when they're not. And so we're going to go through this article and talk about this insanity. But you'll see here why I am just shocked that this folly is continuing on in our culture as much as it is. And it will get worse. Mark my words, it will get worse. It says the Federal Appeals Court, so there's some judge, some court, tosses anti-trans lawsuit over school sports. So now they call people, if you're a person who looks at a boy, and here's a picture of the biological male. Let's bring that picture up here. There he is. This dude right here, he is a boy. He's a man. I don't know how old he is. I mean, of course, 18 is usually the legal age of adulthood. He could be 17. I don't know. But this dude is a dude. He's a guy. That is a girl. This is male. This is male. This is female. How do I know? Because I can tell. I can look, and it's apparent. It's manifestly apparent. This here looks to be a black female. This here looks to be a white female. This here looks to be a white female. This here is a black male. And this is a black male. Okay, so we're looking at it. Our eyes are telling us one thing. And we're saying, wait, why are these mixed genders running in the same race? This is crazy. This is absurd. Why would they group boys and girls together? That puts the girls at a disadvantage for running. They're in there, and this is a women's sport competition. So the women here are exactly doing right. They're in their sport, right? Women's sports, women's track, they're doing exactly what they should be doing. But these guys are out of place. You know, like those pictures, what's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this picture? This is a women's athletic event in Connecticut. And you have two guys, two boys, two dudes who are obviously dudes. They're running in the girls' race. And there are people more and more and more every day, and judges and courts and government officials like the Biden administration and the Democrats in the House like Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats in the Senate like Chuck Schumer and all the other Democrats. They're trying to say that this is perfectly okay. This makes perfect sense. And I'm saying, what kind of madhouse do we live in today in this society? What kind of world do we wake up to every morning and go out into? We're living in a madhouse and an insane asylum because of the way the secular world is now ruling things. But as Christians, we have to stand for the truth. So let's go further. And it talks about an appeals court on Friday threw out a case brought by 4 cisgender high school girls in Connecticut. Okay, first of all, the language here is way, way loaded. It's already not fair. And you have to realize that. And I think you do if it's pointed out to you. Federal Appeals Court tosses anti-trans. So it's anti-trans to look at these guys in this women's sporting event and say, wait a minute, there's something wrong with that. If you point that out, there's something anti-trans about you. And so if you're these girls here that want to bring lawsuit against those two athletes and say, wait, that's not fair, then these girls are the anti-trans proponents of this lawsuit. This is called gaslighting. you are pointing out something obvious, and the people around you are saying, well, no, there's nothing wrong with that. There's something wrong with you. You must be crazy. So they're trying to gaslight not only the whole country, but they're specifically gaslighting these girls that brought a lawsuit. Now, here's the other loaded language brought about by 4 cisgender high school girls. Now, what is cisgender? I mean, I've graduated from high school. I went to college. I have a college degree, and then I have undergraduate degrees. I have a doctorate. And I never encountered the word cisgender. That's only appeared, I guess, in the last 3 or 4 years. Well, this is a word that was coined by the trans activists, wouldn't you know? And what that means is that the gender you were, and they call it, assigned at birth. So they no longer concede that boys are born biologically boys and girls are born biologically girls. They now say that the doctor is the one that determined what we would call a baby by his choice of gendering that baby. Isn't this insanity? Instead of saying, look, we can tell obviously what a baby is by their biology. No, these trans activists are saying, well, no, you were simply categorized that by some doctor. He just called you that. Well, that is nonsense. That's foolishness. Of course, he didn't just arbitrarily define some baby the way they are. The biology categorized that baby based on physical characteristics and biological features. So again, the language is being used, weaponized by the trans activists to set up this whole case, and it's totally false. Now, these 4 high school girls claim the state's trans-inclusive sports policy violated their civic rights and deprived them of a chance to be champions. It did, because these guys keep winning the races. See these guys? Right here. They win the races. These girls, who are real girls, they don't come in first place. So they can't become champions in their own sports because the guys are becoming the champions. So the men have taken over the women's sporting arena. It says the lawsuit filed in 2020 has been seized on in recent years by state lawmakers and governors pushing anti-trans sports bans. No, it's not anti-trans sports bans. It's common sense sanity. That's what they're pushing, a return to sanity because of these activists, liberal, leftist, progressive, so-called judges and Democrats and the Biden administration. And these radicals, they are depriving girls of scholarships, of awards, of recognition, and giving these awards to boys. And that's wrong. It's not anti-trans to say that. But the article is describing it in that biased way. And then it says, with Republicans citing the claims made by the plaintiffs as they sought to prohibit trans girls and women. In other words, they're trying to prohibit boys from running in women's sports. Nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly sane. And yet the wording here is trying to confuse things. And it says they're trying to block them from competing on teams that match their gender identity. Yeah, because your gender identity is not whatever you decide to claim that morning when you wake up. And so these boys are pushing forth a lie. They're saying, well, we're actually women. And the insanity of it is that society up in New England, at least, Connecticut, is going along with that. That's why I said, these people live on a different planet than I do. I have basically nothing in common with your average liberal, leftist, radical, so-called progressive, because they have gone so far out of reality that they even distort the language, so they can't even set up the description of what's taking place without trying to gaslight people like you and me. It says a federal district court judge, a liberal, leftist, progressive, radical judge, dismissed the case in April 2021, saying the girls' request to block the policy was moot because the 2 transgender athletes mentioned in the suit graduated in 2020. And there was no indication that the plaintiffs would again compete against the trans athletes in the state. The district court also said the plaintiffs lacked the procedural threshold known as standing needed to bring the suit. So, in other words, through technicalities, this suit was tossed out because it didn't meet some little technical requirements. In other words, the judges understand what the point is. These girls know that they're not going to compete against these same dudes, and it's probably already ruined their running career. But they want to do it for future athletes, girls, so that they're not deprived of their awards and scholarships. But the judge, through some technicality, this liberal leftist, said, well, no, it's all over now. There's nothing to worry about. You're not going to run into them anymore. And totally missed the point of the suit. Well, it is Friday ruling, and it's Friday ruling. A 3-judge panel of the Second Court of Appeals writing a scathing 29-page ruling that the plaintiffs' claims that the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference policy put them at a competitive advantage was disfounded. Oh, what? So you can have boys running in the girls' track meet, but that doesn't put the girls at a competitive disadvantage? Now let's see what the logic is here. All 4 plaintiffs regularly competed at a state track championship as high school athletes, where plaintiffs had the opportunity to compete for state titles in different events. And on numerous occasions, plaintiffs were indeed champions, finishing first in various events, even sometimes when competing against these 2 boys, the ruling leads, referring to the 2 trans athletes who later joined the suit to defend CIAC policy. Okay, so it's saying, the judge is saying, well, you girls won sometimes. You did win sometimes and even beat the boys sometimes. Okay, but that's not the point. The point is the girls didn't want boys running in the girls' track team. Okay? So that's the point. Not whether, well, you won sometimes or you beat them sometimes in some events. So totally dodging the whole issue again. Plaintiffs simply have not been deprived of a chance to be champions, the panel wrote. Again, missing the point of, hey, this is not just about the girls that are filing this, it's about girls in the future, the ones that haven't lost to the boys yet. The Alliance Defending Freedom, the conservative nonprofit that is representing the plaintiffs, said in a statement following the ruling that they're evaluating all legal options, including appeal. So I hope they do appeal and just keep on coming back until these morons get the point. It's not about what happened in the past as much as what's going to happen in the future if we keep allowing boys to compete against the girls. Our clients, like all female athletes, deserve access to fair competition. Exactly. The group's senior counsel said in the statement, every woman deserves the respect and dignity that comes with having an equal opportunity to excel and win in athletics. And ADF remains committed to protecting future of women's sports. Good. So hopefully they will appeal that. It says the plaintiffs have argued that the CIAC policy is a violation of Title IX, which bars discrimination on the basis of sex. The policy, they said in the suit, results in boys displacing girls in competitive track events in Connecticut. It's exactly right. Boys have their own athletic events. Girls have their separate athletic events. These boys, not winners in the boys' events, now want to compete in the girls' events so they can win. And I'm sorry that just because these boys want to win and just because they're willing to make fools of themselves and claim to be girls doesn't mean girls should have to follow that insanity. They shouldn't have to go along with that insanity. Neither should the parents of these girls have to put up with this insanity. But the court disagreed with the plaintiff's Title IX claim, citing, among other things, a 2020 Supreme Court ruling that said federal civil rights laws protect LGBTQ workers. Oh, okay. So now they're going to the Supreme Court, the Justice Kennedy Supreme Court that legalized gay marriage. And I'm sure they'll find some really good statements in there that they can use to try to justify this foolish insanity. And they did. They found some statements, and that's what they based their ruling on. So, in other words, the girls filed suit against Connecticut and said, look, we want girls competing with girls. And the judge here says, well, no, these girls, these trans athletes are girls, and so you have to respect their choice. In other words, we're worried more about the boys that are identifying girls as all the girls in their own sport. Title IX includes language identical to that of Title VII, broadly prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sex. What, biological sex? Yeah, that makes sense. But this whole fictitious transsexual identity thing, no, it shouldn't cover transsexual identity because that's something inside the person's head that's not based on any objective biology. Sex should be defined as biology. They wrote, thus, it cannot be said that the policy which prohibits discrimination based on a student's transgender status by allowing all students to participate on gender-specific teams consistent with their gender identity. No, it's not their gender identity. It should be based on their gender, biological sex. Though the conservatives pushing anti-trans, it's not anti-trans, it's reality, people. Another gaslighting here. This whole article, this is how kids in school are taught in the school system today. This is why it's basically an indoctrination to go to a public school in these days, especially the higher ones like junior high and high school, because they are being groomed. These kids are being groomed to transition, so-called, into the opposite sex. They're being sexualized by language and concepts and ideas, basically overthrowing the entire moral structure of the Western world, and it's happening in the school system. Though the conservatives pushing sanity sports bans have argued that the transgender women and girls have physical advantages over cisgender. Or let me read this the way it should say. Though common sense people pushing for common sense reality-based sports bans have argued that boys dressing up like girls have physical advantages over real girls in sports. Yeah, that's true. If you're a boy and you were born a boy and you've lived like a boy and then you identify at the last moment so you can run a race, yeah, you have an advantage because obviously, if you know anything about the anatomy of a boy compared with a girl, there are so many advantages in sports. It's ridiculous. You'd have to spend all day listing the advantages. Muscle mass, bone density structure, just on and on and on and on. It's just obvious. It's so obvious that having to even defend that is ridiculous. The Connecticut lawsuit was unique in that it represented a rare instance in which trans-inclusive sports policy was challenged by regular athletes. The legal battles around the issue have been largely brought by LGBTQ advocates who have in recent years have some limited success in fighting the bans, including last year when a federal judge temporarily blocked West Virginia's enforcements of its anti-trans sports ban. It's not anti-trans to stop boys from competing with women. Again, you can't hardly hear a summary of these issues without the gaslighting and the total dishonest use of language. It's not anti-trans to want the girls to be in girls' competition and not boys in girls' competition. Today's ruling is a critical victory for fairness, equity, and inclusion. Okay, American civil liberties attorney who defended the Connecticut policy. No, it isn't. It is not a victory. It is a absurdly foolish defeat for sanity. The court rejected the baseless zero-sum arguments presented by the opposition to this policy and ultimately found transgender girls have as much right to play as cisgender girls under. So biologically boys have as much right as biologically girls to run in girls' sports. How? How is that fair? It isn't. Block added in a statement to CNN that the ACLU hopes the decision finally puts this case to rest and allows everyone involved to move on with their lives. No, you can't move on because of this injustice. Talk about injustice. The left always likes to harp about injustice. Well, here is a clear-cut case of injustice, and they don't care about it because justice goes just one way with them, their way. Well, we're being challenged as Christians to make a choice. We're being tempted here to simply look at this situation as it is and as it's unfolding in our country. And we can either say, yeah, that's okay, because the courts have ruled it. I guess they've looked into it. And I guess it's okay for boys to run in girls' sporting competitions. I guess that's okay. So I guess we can move on and not argue about it. And because we're so divided in our country anyway, I guess this is a good opportunity. Let's just move on and not argue about it. Okay, we can do that. But we can't do that if we want to cling to the truth. We can't do that if we want to live by God's will and God's revelation of himself in the Bible. Or we can say, well, no, this is not right, but I'm not going to say anything about it because, after all, it's not the heart of the gospel. It's not at the heart of Christianity. It's not in the creeds. The Apostle Creed doesn't talk about this situation. It's not like a high priority for Christians. So let's just let it go and let society go on its merry way, and let's not cause trouble. Let's be peaceful, and let's just let them do what they want to do, which is actually not being the salt of the earth, if you take that attitude. You are not standing up for the truth. You are not spreading the word of God. You are simply capitulating, just like the first, or although you still object to it, you're capitulating. Or we can say the third alternative is, no, we're going to object to this because it's not true. We will not lie to ourselves. We will not lie to others. We will not call girls cisgender girls. We will call them girls, just girls. We don't buy into that cisgender assigned at birth rigmarole. We will not call these boys who are running in this girls' competition, we'll not call them girls. We'll not call them trans girls. They're not trans women. They're not trans females. They're biologically boys, so we will call them boys. And we refuse to be gaslit and manipulated psychologically, and we will not be bullied by language and distorted propaganda manipulated articles. Doesn't matter if the Joe Biden administration says it is. We will object to that. It doesn't matter if the House Democrats object to it, or the Senate Democrats, or the whole liberal leftist party. It doesn't matter. We're going to live by the truth, and we may have to die by the truth, but we will not go along with this transgender insanity. So pray about that. Be strong. We'll see you back next week. God bless.